Hello, today I'm going to be reading The Gift of the Magi, and in this version, vocabulary is made easier to understand. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Penny saved 1 and 2 at a time by pushing over or knocking down the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent accusation of cheapness with money that such close dealing suggested. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the old and dirty couch and yell. So Della did it, which starts the thinking process of what is wrong and right, and that life is made up of cries, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles ruling. While the mistress or woman of the home is slowly lessening from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. An apartment that has furniture in it is $8 per week. It did not exactly look like a home of a poor person, but it certainly hinted at it. In the lobby below was a letter box, into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could sweet-talk and encourage, also belonging to that place having the name of Mr. James Dillingham Young on it. So here we're learning that our character, Della, is upset because she only has $1.87, and the next day is going to be Christmas. And that's not a lot of money to have when you want to go Christmas shopping. We also learn that she lives in an apartment that has been furnished. It has furniture in it, and they pay her and her husband, Mr. James Dillingham Young, they pay $8 for it. And they're not necessarily living in severe poverty, but they are poor, and they don't have a lot of money. The Dillingham had been thrown to the breeze during an earlier period of richness when its owner was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to 20, though, they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and simple D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his apartment above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. So now we're just learning a little bit about this couple. And basically, even though they have these formal names, when James comes home, he's just known as Jim to his beloved wife, Della. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. And in this paragraph, we're seeing the word gray pop up 3 times. And when you think of gray, you think of like dull and boring and sad. And that is how Della is feeling right now. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are, only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. So here we're learning that she loves her husband so much, and she really just wants to buy him something that she feels is a worthy gift of all that he represents to her. There was a cheap mirror made from tiny strips of glass between the windows of the room. Maybe you have seen a mirror like this, and an $8 flat. And when I say flat, I really just mean apartment. A very thin and very quick-moving person may, by watching his reflection, get a fairly truthful idea of his looks. Della, being slender, and with much practice of looking at herself in such a mirror, did it successfully. So we're just learning a bit about the apartment. So the construction of the apartment is made with cheap parts, essentially. And here is just a mirror, and it's in strips. So if you can imagine looking at yourself in a mirror that is made up of these tiny strips, you're never going to see yourself fully, as if you were looking at one complete mirror that doesn't have the barriers of these little strips. But Della's practiced it enough so that she can look at herself and see a good enough picture of herself in a mirror that's really not that great. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Quickly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were two things in which the James Dillingham Youngs had a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba, a royal Bible character, lived in the apartment across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to lower the value of Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon, a royal Bible character, been the janitor with all his treasure piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from jealousy. So in this paragraph, we're learning that Della and Jim have a lot of pride in two things: in this gold watch that had been passed down in Jim's family, and in Della's extremely long, beautiful hair. And in fact, they're making the comparison to these royal Bible characters to show just how much pride they had in these items of hair and the watch. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost an article of clothing for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she paused for a minute and stood, while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. So here we're able to imagine Della's hair. It goes down to her knees. So she has very long hair. It's so long, in fact, that it could be like clothing wrapped around her body. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she rushed like a bird with wings out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Safrani, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up the steps Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Safrani. And here that just means that the name Safrani must be a worthy name in this area right now. So by the looks of this lady, her looks don't match the name. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. So this is a hard decision for Della. She has a lot of pride in her hair, and this is hard for her. So she's saying, okay, just do it quickly. And here we see an image of Della before she gets her hair cut. Oh, and the next 2 hours went by very quickly as Della was focused on shopping. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. So she was looking all over the stores, trying to find the perfect gift for her husband. So that after getting her hair cut, she was just focused completely on finding the best gift possible for her husband. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum watch, chain simple and clean in design, properly announcing its value by substance alone and not by false, showy, fancy decoration, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly eager about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it secretly or slyly because it was attached with an old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. So here we're learning that she has found this wonderful watch chain for her husband, and then she's just talking about he likes to look at his watch, but sometimes he's a bit embarrassed to pull it out because of this old leather strap. So now this chain that she bought for him is going to replace that, and she thinks that he's going to be very eager and happy to pull it out and let other people see it. So again, appealing to Jim's sense of pride in that watch that he owns. When Della reached home, her excitement gave way a little to caution, intelligence, and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing what was left of her hair, which was the result made because of her generosity and love for her husband, which is always a giant task, dear friends, a huge task. So now she's starting to think a little bit about the consequence of her decision. Because she loved her husband so much, she gave up something that meant a lot to her and to him, her hair, and now she's trying to repair her hair because it's cut short. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a schoolboy who refuses to go to school. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, long, carefully, and critically. "If Jim doesn't kill me," she said to herself, "before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? So now she is worried about what her husband is going to think of her new haircut, because during this time, most women had long hair. Okay, so that's why she makes the reference to the Coney Island chorus girls who do have short hair, but during this time, most women keep their hair long. At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the pork chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the watch chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair, away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit for saying little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." So again, she's really worried about what her husband is going to think about her hair. The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He was only 22, and to be weighted down with a family. He needed a new overcoat or jacket, and he was without gloves. So now we're learning that they're a very young couple, and she's worried that he feels weighted down with a family. In other words, he has a lot of responsibility. And we already learned earlier that he was making $30, and now he's cut down to $20. So they don't have a lot of money. And so she just feels bad for him. And I'm going to stop reading here because I know I'm going to run out of time. I'm going to stop this recording, and I'm going to come back with a part 2 and finish this paragraph and then continue on and finish the story. Thank you.